From an unsuccessful bout against Dustin Poirier in 2021 to spending his time away from the UFC partying, Conor McGregor's been out of the octagon for 2 years at this point. He says he's recuperating from a broken leg, but turns out he'd been planning his next big move in the promotion all along. After establishing himself as the unofficial face of the UFC, McGregor's taken a pretty long leave of absence from the promotion. The last time we saw him in the octagon was in 2021 against Poirier, but that match ended up with a win for Poirier and a broken leg for McGregor. That's when the Irishman announced he'd be taking time off to heal and plan his next move. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought his next move would be another fight, but it's McGregor we're talking about. Did anyone expect him not to make a big scene when he came back? As it turns out, the Irishman would be one of the 2 coaches on the Ultimate Fighter 31. His opposing coach would be Michael Chandler, and it keeps getting better, because Chandler's also the guy McGregor's facing off in the octagon in August. That's immediately after the series ends.
And right now he's gotten out ahead of Dustin a little bit.
His agent probably set it up for him, thinking it was the best way for McGregor to make his return. And honestly, I'd agree. Though that's not the only reason why the Irishman's doing it. I mean, if you were to ask McGregor what motivated him to join TUF as a coach, he'd tell you it had to do with giving back to the company. So, on an episode of The Mac Life, he was asked to elaborate on this. And McGregor said that after being a part of the promotion for so long, he felt like it was time he gave something back. That something being his wisdom. But there's something in it for him as well. McGregor claims that by returning to the scene first as a coach for young and hungry fighters, he'll have a chance to feed off of their energy ahead of his own matchup against Chandler later on. This wouldn't be the first time McGregor's trained the younger generation of fighters. Back in 2015, his coaching style went up against Uriah Faber's, and while McGregor's team won, he says he'll be going about things a lot differently this time around. The Irishman claimed that he'd come off a hard training camp himself back in 2015, and that he didn't have the time to immerse himself in training as he should have back then. This time, however, he claims that he'll be as active a part as the young fighters in training, since he has to show his own skills in the octagon not soon afterward. This might make McGregor versus Chandler one of the highest grossing events. According to BetMGM, the Irishman headlined 6 of the UFC's highest grossing events in history. And considering how his matchup against Chandler is being hyped up by the fact that the 2 are opposing coaches on TUF 31, this might bring up the tally to 7. Fans are probably also looking to tune in to TUF 31 just to see how things will be different this time around. During McGregor's first coaching stint, he builds a reputation for himself for being too hands-off. The Irishman's given his explanation. He was just coming out of a hard training camp and had to recover from a difficult win against Chad Mendes at UFC 189. And he promises that things will be different this time around. Guess we'll have to see it to believe it, right? Also, even though McGregor's the unofficial face of the UFC, the Irishman's been having a bit of a tricky time these past few years. And by tricky, I mean multiple lawsuits. Now, things haven't been great inside the octagon for Conor McGregor. His last 4 matchups have seen him go 1-3. In the meantime, the Irishman kept busy by partying and getting sued. One of which, coincidentally, happened after a party. An unnamed woman came forward and alleged that McGregor had struck her in the face twice before forcing her to jump off his party boat sometime in 2022. The woman claimed that she'd known McGregor back when the 2 were teens in Dublin and had recently reconnected at one of his on-land party events. After the party, McGregor invited the woman and then some to his party yacht. The morning after, she claimed that the Irishman seemed irritable and picked a fight with her. He called her a few names, and when she retaliated, he struck her in the face. That's when she felt scared and intimidated and jumped off the yacht. Initially, she filed a report against the fighter, but but later redacted her claims. She'd then go on to file her claim from her native Ireland, before redacting her claims for a second time following 2 separate occasions where she felt McGregor's fans had tried to harm her. Once when a brick was thrown through her window, and the second time when someone set her car on fire. So yes, McGregor's been out of the ring, but the notorious one's been in the news as much as ever. He refused to comment on the whole ordeal though, as he typically does with all his lawsuits. So let's talk more about when he's actually being the loudest one in the room. A snippet of TUF 31 shows the Irishman drowning out Chandler. True to his words, McGregor's taken on a more active coaching approach 8 years after being branded a hands-off coach. TUF 31 is set to be released sometime in the spring of this year. Meanwhile, snippets from the show are constantly being released to keep viewers engaged. As if having McGregor and Chandler on as coaches weren't enough, the snippet shows McGregor standing ringside in a 3-piece outfit yelling out coaching advice to his fighters. Beautiful shot. From the wrist to the shot. Beautiful knee to the body. Back up again. Back up. Face the fence. Get into a pad on the fence. The snippet also featured a rarely seen sight of the Irishman, one where he's actually encouraging his fighters and cheering them on. Granted, he was only cheering them on because they listened to his advice, but we've seen McGregor lose his cool a few times back in 2015, most notably towards Sasha Sharma when he felt like the fighter wasn't listening to his advice and kept giving up his position against Chris Grutzmacher. To McGregor's credit, he was right. Even Sharma admitted to it. After the Irishman called him a and a fucking pussy, Sharma admitted that he'd been off his game. But let's be honest, seeing McGregor throw his glasses and scream directly into the camera did make for some good quality television. And I have high hopes for TUF 31. The Ultimate Fighter sees a group of young fighters trying to get a spot on the promotion's roster, and White calls in some of the biggest names in the promotion to help them get there. The concept is pretty entertaining in itself, made all the more entertaining by the fact that McGregor's going up against Chandler in the show and afterward, and the fact that he's been accused of receiving special treatment. Chris Curtis claimed that McGregor had a few of the fighters replaced with his own teammates, to which Dana White asked, "Who gives a and clarified that only one fighter had been replaced, and that fighter would get a fair shot at entering the UFC in some other way. Things are already looking intense for TUF, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds. That was all on Conor McGregor's second stint as a coach on TUF.